AP students. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP History classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, or AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and show notes to find the topics that you need help with. AP History Help is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, where I am happy to answer your questions. In this episode, I will hold your hand through Happy Land. Ew, that sounded creepy, didn't it? Well, let's make it sound a little more academic. In this episode, I will help you understand how to get the analysis point on the DBQ essay. This doesn't apply to the LEQ because the rubric is just different and you're not using documents, but the sourcing point, also called analysis, is easy if you just understand what it is and how to get it. But before we get too far along, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you listen to my last episode where I explained the difference between summarizing the documents and using them to support your thesis. There were lots of examples for each of the AP History courses. I managed to work in the Constitution a couple of times and even shared which amendment is my favorite. You could go back and listen to find out because they're all on demand for your listening and or watching pleasure. Last week, I wondered out loud if you were sick of documents, and then I proceeded to spend our time together in class talking about summarizing them and using them as support. So hopefully you've come back for more, because we are going to build on that summary and support piece with some analysis. Like I was saying before, earning this point is easy. All it takes is an acronym and some practice to be happy when it comes to sourcing. We're first going to explore what those words, analysis and sourcing, mean holistically and in the context of the AP exam. Then we're going to explore that HAPPY acronym and put it into practice. Then, just like the last few episodes, we'll close out with some real AP exam-ples. You see what I did there? Exam-ples, like they're actually from past AP exams? Huh? Oh, sorry. Did I tell you that I was going to start including some bad teacher jokes in class? Laughter is so good for remembering what you're learning. I won't get into the brain science behind it, but we remember things better when we're in a happy mood when we are learning it. Analysis. What does it mean to analyze something? It is the process of breaking something into smaller parts in order to gain a better understanding of it. We start to do that when we look at the parts of a document. Who wrote it? When? To whom? What were the circumstances? Where was it written from and about? But historical analysis adds a new piece to this. Historical analysis is examining evidence from the past to create this deeper understanding of and picture of that time, place, event, etc. I want to repeat that for emphasis. A deeper understanding. Grabbing author, time, place is like swimming over the surface of the water. You really don't know what lies beneath. But when you dive down deeper, you gain a better understanding of this body of water. Is it cooler? Darker? What kind of fish are there? Is it clear, murky? The same with historical events. You gain a deeper understanding of the topic by diving into these pieces of evidence better known as documents. And what about sourcing? What does it mean to source something? It is the act of understanding who the author is, their purpose, who they wrote it for, all for the purpose of analysis or interpretation. You are putting yourself as best you can into the shoes of the author and looking around at your situation, the place you're in, what's happening around you, to analyze, gain deeper understanding of the topic. And so, to try and clear up any confusion, teachers can, will, and do use those two terms interchangeably as it pertains to this point on the DBQ. So don't worry about it. Call it what you want to call it. The College Board groups it with the complexity point and calls them both analysis and reasoning. It's much more important that you know what to do rather than what to call it. The scoring criteria for this point states, quote, for at least 2 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience is relevant to an argument. And then they go on to provide what they call their decision rules. Those state, to earn this point, the response must explain how or why, rather than simply identifying, the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience is relevant to an argument about the prompt for each of the 2 documents sourced. And this is where happy comes in. The letters HAPP stand for historical situation, audience, point of view, and purpose. And we add the why because that is where we answer the question, why? Or to use the words of the College Board, the response must explain how or why it's relevant to your argument. You guys, this is super easy. To get this point, you only need to do this twice in your essay. Not all 4 things either. You could do 1 point of view and 1 historical situation. You could do 2 audiences. It doesn't matter the combination, but for 2 different documents, you pick 1 way to analyze it. 1 letter from HAP. And we'll get to how momentarily. Now, you can't analyze 1 document in 2 different ways. It does specifically say for each of the 2 documents sourced. This is where I tell you that if they ask for 2, it's really a good idea to do it 3 times. Yes, you are smart, but on the day of the exam, sometimes your brain just gets a little mushy and the wires get crossed. Analyze 3 documents for insurance, just in case. Oh, what's that? You want a perfect score? You're going for that last complexity point? 1 way to do it is to analyze 4 documents. Or, again, for insurance, analyze 5. So when you're reading the documents, look for how you might analyze every single one, and then pick the 2 or the 5 that you feel least comfortable about to analyze. Yeah, I want you to analyze 5 out of the 7 documents to go for those maximum points. I know, it's hard to keep track of all the things you need to know in an AP history class. So I spent a good chunk of time trying to organize things in a way that you can reflect daily and see the big picture. I call it the AP History Success Journal, and it's available on Amazon. It is set up to be a user-friendly weekly companion on your journey to acing the AP exam. I want you to be able to focus on the important content each day, each week, the thinking skills that we cover in our class and in your AP classroom. And most importantly, you should always take time to reflect on the overall process of what you're learning and which skills you're developing. I've put a bunch of other little tips and tricks in there to help answer a lot of questions that I think you might have. I will put the link to purchase the Student Success Planner in the show notes, but you can also access it through the aphistoryhelp.com website, or head on over to Amazon and search on Success Planner for History Students AP, and it will be at the top of the search results. And podcast listeners heard it first. The price is going up soon. The price is low right now to get them out there. Plus, it's towards the end of the school year, but the value is much more than $14.97 price tag. I want you to have a chance to grab one before that price goes up. So run, don't walk, to Amazon and add to cart button. And if you're listening to this after I raise the price, get in contact with me and I'll tell you how to get it for that original price. I heard you asking before that little break, how do I know what the letter of HAP even is? Yes, students, I'm going to talk about each one. Get out your paper and pen and get ready to take notes. Unless, of course, you're driving somewhere that you can't take notes. Okay, yes, I'll put it in the show notes. Historical situation is looking at what is going on in the time period that the document was created. And how was the document influenced by the time period? Is it responding to issues in this period? Think about Francis Scott Key writing the Star-Spangled Banner as bombs were flying over his head during the War of 1812. If he hadn't been there at that moment in time, just imagine. He wrote, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave. Those words are so much more powerful knowing he was witnessing this battle and unsure if America was winning or not until he saw in the red glare of the rockets and the bombs the American flag still waving away. Next is audience. For this, sometimes you know who it's written for, and sometimes you have to say things like, this was likely meant for this guy or this group. It's okay. It can be audience or intended audience. For whom was this document written? And how does the audience influence the message of the document? You're going to write a letter to a teacher different from a friend. Think of the Declaration of Independence. Who were Jefferson, Franklin, Sherman, et al. Writing to? Many people will say the King of England. That's not wrong, but my APUSH students, they know that it was a breakup letter to the king, an announcement to the world that America was declaring itself independent from England, and it was written to the colonists to rally the troops. Either way, it might have been written differently if it were only intended for the king or only for the colonists. The words were chosen to appeal to all three of those groups. Point of view is not opinion. Repeat after me, students. Point of view is not opinion. Point of view is not opinion. Good. Point of view does look at any biases, but we ask, why is this author putting forth this message at this time? In other words, why does the document or the author say what it does the way that it does? Let's say that you're listening to a podcast about how to succeed in your AP history class, and the host is a college-educated teacher with decades of experience teaching AP history and has graded more AP history essays than there are stars in the sky. Yes, that's hyperbole. In addition, she has a master's degree, a website called AP History Help, has written a book, and has hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of experience tutoring AP students. Last, she keeps giving you information for free. just so you can learn more and succeed in your AP History class. This podcast is one that should have excellent, reliable information in it. There is no hidden agenda except trying to be as informative as possible in about 20 minutes. On the other hand, there's a podcast hosted by a college student who's majoring in marketing. He passed APUSH about 5 years ago with the 3. He makes some crazy claims about if you buy his video series and review Cram Packet for $99, you will pass the exam. As a matter of fact, it seems like he talks more about what you will find in his videos than how to succeed on the exam. Which one is a better source of information on AP history? Which one will support an argument better? Well, I do suppose it depends on what that argument is. And last, we have purpose. Purpose asks what the author is trying to achieve. What impact is the author or creator trying to have on the intended audience? The purpose of the Magna Carta was to limit the power of crazy King John. The purpose of King Henry's act of supremacy was to name himself the head of the Church of England and sever the country's ties to the church in Rome. Now, before we continue with examples, it's time for Wendy Teaches History. Sit back, students. It's time for a story. This episode is released on February 12th, and I'm torn between Abraham Lincoln, since it's his birthday, and St. Valentine. And here's why I'm choosing the latter. I feel like I've been favoring a lot of APUSH content. Plus, I'm a sucker for a good love story. So, back in the days of the Roman Empire, after Christianity began, but around when it barely could be legally practiced, the Emperor Aurelius forbade the Bishop Valentine from continuing to perform marriage ceremonies for Christian soldiers because he needed them to fight in wars. And if they were married, they'd be reluctant to leave their new brides. But Valentine defied the emperor's decree, and he was thrown in prison for it. While there, he performed a miracle. He cured the jailer's daughter of blindness, and allegedly the two fell in love. Now, this was not looked at favorably by the bishop, and Valentine was executed on February 14th of the following year. On the eve of his death, he sent a passionate letter to his beloved, simply signed, "Your Valentine." Now, there's another version of this story, but I like this one. All right, back to business. Remember, you have to connect the why of each analysis point. Tie it back to how your document supports your argument. Yep, that was last episode, episode 14. Say the words, this means, this is important because, this shows, this supports, this provides value or detracts from it. Got it? And I want you to realize there can be overlap between these 4 areas. Going back to the Star-Spangled Banner, Francis Scott Key was at the battle experiencing fear and not knowing who was winning. I used that as historical situation, but you could also talk about his point of view, full of fear, not knowing who was winning the battle. Don't be afraid of that. If you say one or the other or both, you've met the requirements for one of the 2 examples of analysis. Another example is the Declaration of Independence. I told you about the audience, but you could easily overlap with purpose. Why was it written to the king, the world, the colonists? And how did that influence what was being said? And last, I promised you some examples. I'll give one example from each course, starting with AP Euro. This is from the 2019 exam, and the prompt is, evaluate whether or not the Catholic Church in the 1600s was opposed to new ideas in science. One of the documents is written by Galileo, where he claims that contradictions between the Bible and heliocentrism are attributable to the abstruse language of the Bible. For point of view, you could say that he's acting in his own self-interest as an astronomer who believes in the heliocentric model and is persecuted as a result. Or, for audience or purpose, you could say that Galileo seeks the support of political authorities as sponsors of science and to counterbalance the church. Next up, a push. The 2019 DBQ prompt was evaluate the extent to which the progressive movement fostered political change in the United States from 1890 to 1920. One of the documents is from 20 Years at Hull House, written by Jane Addams. The historical situation is that immigration and industrialization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries led to rapid population growth in cities such as Chicago and an expansion in demand on political leaders for municipal services. Or for point of view, you could say progressive reformers like Adams sought to exercise control, social control, by cleaning up urban political machines and uplifting immigrants by Americanizing them. And last, for AP World, the prompt from 2021 asks you to evaluate the extent to which European imperialism affected economies in Africa and or Asia in the 19th and early 20th centuries. So one of the documents was a graph, and these are probably the more challenging to analyze. So I wanted to give you two possibilities. First is purpose. As Great Britain was becoming an increasingly industrialized country during this period, the purpose of the EIC, the East India Company, providing this data to Parliament may have been in part to show that it was playing its part in providing markets for British industrial goods, the most important one of which was cotton textiles. Notice the qualifier like, may have been, and next, the historical situation. Because of the system of company rule in India, the EIC, rather than the British government, had effective control of large parts of the Indian subcontinent. That explains why it was the EIC's responsibility to collect such trade information and to report it to the British Parliament. Want more? Want to see the whole DBQ, the prompt, the documents, the sample essays with commentary? Guess what? I have them. Send me a DM on whichever platform you follow me on, or contact me through my website. You could even call or text me. The number's on the website, aphistoryhelp.com. I'll be happy to send a sample, or better yet, let's get on Google Meet and look at one another. Next episode, we are going to jump into complexity. The College Board sure made my life easier in August when they changed up how you can earn this point. I'll go over the easy ways as well as the not so easy ways. If you are striving for that 7 on your DBQ and that 5 on your AP exam, you are not going to want to miss episode 16. It's being released on February 26th. What history will I teach in that one? Anyway, hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching so you'll be notified whenever it and any new episodes are released. Don't forget about that AP Student Success Journal, only available at this low price for a short time. I'll link to it in the show notes, or just search for Student Success Journal AP on Amazon. And I would be so grateful if you would tell your friends who are taking or thinking about taking AP history classes about the podcast. I'm here to help as many students as possible to be successful in the course and on the exam. That will do it for this episode. Don't forget to come to Wendy for AP History Help. And this episode of AP History Help podcast is now history.